justice for all. All right, we're going to get into grievance 0806. Who's starting for this one?
I am. Thank you. This grievance arises from Lieutenant Klein's recommendation of a 5-day suspension for Officer DePina.
I wonder if I could stop you for a second,
Yes.
Attorney Bailey. I was wondering if I could go back to grievance 804, the first one we heard.
Okay, certainly.
I would like the public to be aware that we are not privy to any of these grievances before we were presented to, they were presented to us Monday night. So there's a lot of documentation to digest here. So I had a couple questions back on the first one, grievance 804.
Yes, sir.
On page 3, and I think I would like to direct this to Attorney Cahill. I'm sorry, tab 2. Tab 2, grievance report 804.
Yes.
Okay, you have it?
You're on page 3, sir?
Right. The relief requested. The first paragraph, I guess you asked for the word blatant to be eliminated. For the second paragraph, you're asking for an immediate change to the collective bargaining agreement. I'm just curious, and I'm not a union man, are there any precedents set for amending a CBA in the middle of the CBA? In view of the fact that ours expires next year, June 30, 2010, and we will be negotiating another one?
Well, the parties by mutual agreement can interpret a particular article that suits the benefit to both parties. If there's been some misunderstanding, or they feel like one party is misinterpreted and to the detriment of the other, I think when we were speaking of it the other night, we were looking to at least just get an admission that it was unwarranted to bring them in for the reason that was stated, realizing that doing impact bargaining at a grievance hearing would be a little bit unusual.
Okay.
Right. I understood that your position Monday was that the relief you were requesting now was a finding by the commission that there was a violation of the contract, and that's it.
That's correct.
Yeah. And the second part of that really is for bargaining at some future time.
That's correct.
Could we go back to tab 3 and grievance 805? Okay. Keep in mind that I am not a personnel expert, so I may be asking some questions that are out of line, but could you tell us, Attorney Cahill, how long Officer DePina has been on the Hooksett Police Department?
When's your anniversary? His 10th year anniversary comes in July.
Okay. And this question may also be out of line, but is his past personnel record out of line as far as questioning at these hearings?
I think it would be out of line as it wasn't something that was presented to. I don't have it. It wasn't offered as an offer of proof, and we had mutual disclosure between the parties. So I would think it would be out of line, not because I think there'd be something negative, it's just that it wasn't something that was stated would be here.
Okay, keep in mind, and I'm fairly new to this commission, I've been around for like 2 years, so I didn't know, I had no idea how many prior offenses there have been, and I don't know if there's such a thing, not being an attorney, is there is a habitual offender rule like there is in a court of law. Is that something that is not germane to a union?
I think management reserves, has a right to bring discipline, but they also have a right to stay within the contract and make sure it's for just cause. I think it's a union position and the court's position that to ensure that due process is used in that. But as far as packing on a couple disciplinary hearings and then saying someone has to go, I think it really goes to the nature and the type of discipline we're talking about. For example, everything that we're talking about here for these last 2 days has been all internally generated matters, like whether you got to report in on time or something like that, as opposed to, and I'll say something that's outside this department, my own department, where there was an alleged abuse of a motorist who filed a complaint. That's dealt at a far more serious level than I think what we're dealing with here.
Okay. So if I understand you then, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you're telling me that each grievance should stand by itself, and past tense has no bearing on the discipline that's been served.
If someone has, it goes into the definition of a serious offense. I mean, obviously I've made my opinion known with regard to what we've discussed already, and where I felt like there was overstepping on the part of the department. I will say that when you read the CBA, that some of those articles that refer to courtesy run both ways. And if there's a misunderstanding on that, I think it's something that is going to be cleared up in short order. I don't know if that answers your question.
Could
Yeah.
I contribute? Article 6, paragraph 4 of the CBA deals specifically, I think, with Commissioner Roy's question.
Excuse me, could you speak up?
Sure.
We can't hear you, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
No. Thank you.
I'm referring the group to Article 6, Section 4, which is part of the CBA, and I think my recollection serves me right, and Mr. Noonan is here, who was on the other side during our last negotiations. This particular provision was actually amended in certain ways, but it deals with what you can consider and what you can't consider with regard to the past conduct of or misconduct of a particular grievant at a hearing. There are certain, and we can all read it ourselves, but what it comes down to is certain serious offenses never go away and can be considered when you're considering what to do with a grievant, and certain less serious offenses after a period of time do go away and are marked in the grievance personnel file as resolved, in which case they would not be considered. So I think Mr. Cahill was making another point, which is that he and Ms. Bailey had prepared in a certain manner for the hearing, and that I guess past misconduct was not considered or brought up, but it can be considered if it's serious enough in the past.
And if I may, I agree with Attorney Cahill that for purposes of the grievances before you this week, there has not been any issue in looking backward one way or the other into Officer DeFino's personnel records, and we have disclosed information to each other, and the information that Officer DeFino was given by his superiors and by the chief and his superiors have attempted to identify their reasoning and what they base their reasoning on, and that did not include looking into other personnel materials.
Broke it.
Is a suspension not a suspension? I mean, if you had numerous suspensions in prior years, wouldn't that have some bearing on some of the discipline that has been handed out?
It could. Speaking hypothetically, yes, it could, depending on what the issue was. What I was trying to say is that for purposes of the grievances before you this week, Attorney Cahill is correct in that we have not, they were not premised on an analysis of other personnel records.
Okay. Because if I read this, if I read number 4 correctly, which Attorney Higgins just alluded to, it appears you can go back 5 years. Under the CBA.
Well, I guess what I'd be interested in is the point of view of counsel about whether the commission can look back, whether or not you're presenting anything.
I'm not presenting anything other than what we have disclosed to Attorney Cahill and the information that I'm making an offer of proof about what Lieutenant Klein and Captain Cecilio based their reasoning on. So for purposes of the grievances here before you, I don't believe an interpretation of that part of the collective bargaining agreement is needed.
Okay. I guess what I was getting at is, from my own perspective, if I went before court for a DWI 3 times in a row, by 3rd time, I would probably be incarcerated.
Okay, on that, first of all, you'd have to be convicted the 3rd time, and that's exactly the problem with the bias issue that I'm talking about. Because someone was arrested 2 times for OUI, the judge is not sitting there going, oh, well, he's guilty the 3rd time. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that you think that if someone has had some disciplinary, even though you've never seen him in 2 years, that somehow he should be adjudicated by a tribunal that's supposed to be independent and unbiased as being found responsible for everything just because the department brought it forward. And I think that's a corruption of the theory that we're here under, which is you're a tribunal, you're the police commission, you're supposed to be looking at this. We're presenting the facts. This is not France, where the judges actually go in and start doing an investigation. And that would be the union's standpoint on that.
My analogy was, and from my perspective, I guess if you were convicted 3 DWIs in a row, it's like an automatic sentence.
Well, first of all, I think
the point is not that because, and we are talking hypothetically here, but not that a particular grievant is guilty now because he was guilty in the past, but if he was found guilty now, would the commission be within its rights, and should it look to what the past conduct had been of the grievant in assessing the punishment? Not that he's guilty because of what went on in the past, but if he is guilty now, should the commission consider what has happened in the past with this particular grievance?
everything before the commission, the punishment has already been doled out, so what would they be considering?
No, the commission has the right to lower it or raise it. Either,
Well,
or leave it alone.
So, I mean, that's...
Well, I would find it on the second day to bring up these issues which could have been brought up by counsel, or your counsel. We got 2 lawyers representing the town here tonight, that you were going to consider, because then I would look, from my perspective, I would want the personnel records of the people that were giving the discipline and see where they were coming from, and see if they had suspensions and how those worked out, and I would want to see the whole picture then. I was very focused on my delivery of these grievances, and I think Attorney Bailey, to her credit, has stayed on point with what we agreed were the issues at hand.
I just brought it up because of what I stated before. We were presented with this package on Monday night. So there's an awful lot of information to digest here, and we weren't privy to any of this before the meeting. That's my reason for bringing it up. But all right, I'm all set.
As you can continue, or start over.
Start over again.
Thank you. The first grievance we're dealing with tonight is grievance number 0806, and it arises from a recommendation by Lieutenant Klein for a 5-day suspension for Officer Defina. It stems from issues related to Officer Defina's reporting of an incident that took place in one of the schools that he was working at, and the incident took place on December 11th. As you pointed out, your packet of materials is rather thick. I'm just going to direct you behind tab 4 to pages 10 and 11 to give you a little orientation. That is, if you have it, is the personnel records entry form, which is dated December 23rd, 2008, and that is the recommendation for suspension. That is the subject of this grievance. If you look at page 8, under the same tab, you'll see one of the examples of the grievance that has been filed. And at pages 5 and 6, because this goes in reverse chronological order essentially, you'll see the chief's response to the grievance. I'd like to try to give you a brief chronology of events. What happened is that on December 11th, there was an altercation between 2 students at a school that Officer Defina was working at the time. He knew about the incident. It was, I think, by everyone's agreement, something that would and should generate a report from him, and something that he should report to his superior, in this case, Lieutenant Klein. He didn't inform Lieutenant Klein about this incident, again, an assault between 2 students, and he didn't prepare a report about it. Now we fast forward a little bit from that day to December 16th, and there was a meeting before the police commission, and one of the topics at that meeting was a discussion in public about what was going on in the schools. And Chief Agrafiotis had asked Officer Defina, as the school resource officer, and another officer, Officer Linda Warhol, who'd been his predecessor as a school resource officer, to be there to answer questions as they arose. And there was a discussion about what was going on in the school system. It related to actually some concerns that had been raised publicly in the newspaper, and there was some dialogue about what was happening. And during this discussion, Chief Agrafiotis asked Officer Defina whether or not there were any incidents that he was aware of that had not been reported. And he answered no. Lieutenant Klein was also at this meeting, as was Captain Cecilio. And the problem with that answer is that at that point, the December 11 incident between the 2 students had happened. Officer Defina, no question about it, knew about it, and he hadn't reported it at that time. So that answer was not an accurate answer based on the circumstances at hand. So then we go on to the next day, December 17, and the next day what happened is that there is an issue at the same school involving a hate crime. Lieutenant Klein goes to the school and works with Officer Defina in connection with it. There are detectives that are assigned to the situation. And at no time did Officer Defina let Lieutenant Klein know that the same students involved in the December 17 incident were the 2 students that had been involved in the December 11 incident. Lieutenant Klein learns of that not from Officer DeFina, but from the detectives who had been assigned to the case. What happens next is that Officer DeFina does submit a report, but he submits a written report to Lieutenant Klein for the first time on December 19. And all of this, understandably, to Lieutenant Klein poses some very serious concerns. And if you look back to his recommendation on pages 10 and 11, what you'll see is he goes through and he explains his reasoning as to why he thinks a 5-day suspension is warranted under the circumstances. He cites some standards that you also have in your packet. He cites there is an SOP that exists concerning the school resource officer function. He cites to section 2 of that at A2. That's found at page 20 of your packet. He also cites to another section of it, subparagraphs F and I in section 3 that are found at pages 22 and 23 of your packet. And you'll see, and I'm not trying to single out any one particular provision, but you will see that at page 23 when you're talking about section I, it is specifically envisioned that the school resource officer is going to keep his superiors informed about issues that happen in the school. And you'll also see elsewhere in this packet that I've given you the other provisions of the Hooksett Police Department AOMs that Lieutenant Klein, in his view, believed that Officer DeFina had violated by not informing him and by not reporting about this in a timely manner. You'll see A16 that is cited, found at page 12 of your materials, about submitting reports. You'll see there is a section also at page 12, A17, about truthfulness. And finally, there is a section talking about prohibited conduct, and Lieutenant Klein believes that Officer DeFina's conduct under the circumstances constituted neglect of duty. And that's at page 50 of your packets. 50. And he also noted that, the problem with not keeping him informed, the problem of not reporting this in a timely manner, that situation is compounded because of the fact that, at the December meeting, this sort of issue was discussed, and it was important that people did understand the situation. Certainly the police department was trying to provide the public with the best information possible. And so this situation was compounded. This definitely compounded this problem. You'll see in Lieutenant Klein's recommendation that one big concern that he had is that, there's a reason why these incidents need to be reported in a timely manner, and that he is aware of them, and that other people in the police department are aware of them, because there's a hope that by doing everything appropriately and letting people know what's going on and reporting things in a timely manner, maybe there can be things done proactively to avoid similar problems happening in the future. And what we have here is an incident that happened on December 11. It wasn't reported. Nobody was informed about it from Lieutenant Klein's perspective. And what happens next is that, the 2 students are again engaged in some troublesome behavior a little over a week later. So under these circumstances, Lieutenant Klein thought it was serious, and he recommended a 5-day suspension. You'll see that the chief took into account this recommendation, and at pages, I think, 5 and 6, I told you, he set forth his reasoning in why he decided he would uphold that recommendation. Under these circumstances, we return back to why we're here, which is looking at the contract. Discipline must be done for just cause. And we've talked about what Article 18 of the contract provides. Under these circumstances, Article 18 has not been violated. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
And I don't need a long dissertation. What is the definition of a hate crime?
Actually, I believe it is in the statute, if I'm correct, but I will defer to either Lieutenant Klein or Captain Cecilio on that.
Hate crime is fairly simple. I mean, it's your race, gender. That's a hate crime. That's what we look at. When someone picks on you because of your race, that's a hate crime.
So it's just race or gender?
Race, gender, it could be sexual orientation.
All right, speak, Commissioner.
Yes.
It is also in your handouts. My pages aren't numbered in the handout, but in the back there it states, an assault which is based on race, color, religion, etc., known as a hate crime. It's in the policy with the school.
Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't answer that more directly without some help from Captain Cecilio and Lieutenant Klein.
Before that goes out of our memory, was anybody charged with a hate crime? Captain?
Excuse me?
Was anybody charged with a hate crime?
I don't know if they were charged with that. It's a juvenile matter.
We will be able to disclose it or not.
I had
You can't
prosecution would get after detectives. I can look into that and get back to you. I don't know right now if that juvenile was charged or not. Well, we have to look into it if you want that, right?
Well, going back to the chronological order, and December 11th was a Thursday. Officer DeFina, being the SRO officer, was assigned to the schools. He was called to one of the schools around 2 o'clock because of a report of inappropriate material on a person's cell phone, which is commonly referred to as sexting, which can be a felony. He immediately called his supervisor. They were doing oral boards. He talked to Sergeant Detective Pinati, who initially told him it was okay to stay for past, because the shift was starting to end, it was getting towards 3 o'clock, and he gave him permission to stay and research what was going on, and he was trying to run down and stop in the midst the spreading of illicit, what is no other way of saying it, but child porn, and we've all seen it on the news, and that's what was going on. He could not get in touch with Lieutenant Klein or Captain Cecilio. When they dispatched and notified Lieutenant Klein and or Captain Cecilio, they were told that there was an incident going on. Sergeant Detective Pinati was on the phone with Officer DeFina, with Lieutenant Klein and Captain Pinati, and Officer DeFina was told to leave the school. There would be no overtime. So we have a situation where, yes, there was an assault, a misdemeanor, and we have a felony, a potential felony, and he's told that, no holdover. And since you were going back to the other, if you remember, this is the same officer that was called in to respond to, an article in the paper. So he goes, he does what he's told. The principal does tell him about the assault, but he's also informed that it's been handled. In this report that you see on tab 4, page 10, which talks about the altercation, the school handled it by expelling. And in the paperwork that you've had an opportunity to see now, you'll see that it says he had like an in-school suspension. That's not true. One party was expelled. So he was out of the school, the parents were called in by the principal, assistant principals, that was handled. The felony was ongoing. Friday the 12th, Officer DeFina had off. He was called by a person in the department that was investigating this incident, and on his own time, gave him the information that should have been given the night before, but he was told to go home. And let me back up a little bit. He goes back to the station, he's sitting at the computer, and Lieutenant Klein comes up to him from behind, and I'm not reading into this anything sinister, but puts his hands on Officer DeFina's neck and says, depending on your answer, depends on which way I'll turn my hands. Are you off the clock? And, you know, they have internal affairs, and they have lie detectors at this department, and if the two people want to go on the lie detector on that particular thing, that's fine. It seems to me like people want to remember what they want to remember when it's convenient for them. He was told to leave, and then he did. So the 12th is off. The 13th, he's off for Saturday, Sunday, Monday is an ice storm, so the schools aren't open. He's not in the schools. He's on regular patrol. So then you have Tuesday, and they're still talking with the school committee about the sexting issue. The appropriate response would have been for the lieutenant, who knew that there was an issue going on, would be a debriefing when he saw Officer DeFina in the guard room and said, what are the issues going on there? Not being worried about getting them out of the station. If they had done a proper debriefing, which is common in most police departments, then he would have told them, well, we have a possible felony going on that perhaps you want to send the next shift if you don't want to do overtime, because you can send, an E-shift car, that's fine. And we have a past assault and battery misdemeanor that wasn't in the presence of the police officer at all, but it was handled by the principal, and the parents were brought to the school. But he wasn't asked that. He was asked to leave the station. So when it says that the report was 8 days later, 4 of those 8 days he wasn't even working, and he was giving information on his own time to the detectives that were investigating the incident at the school. As far as the Safe Schools report, when you had the commission hearing, I believe that was a public hearing, the assault was still being investigated by Officer DeFina, and I don't think it's proper protocol to talk about ongoing investigations of juveniles at a public hearing. It'd be different if you guys, if the commission were in private session and you kind of want to know if there was anything going on. But in public, where the investigation was not closed and was not submitted as of that time, I don't think it would have been appropriate at that time to bring that issue up. And as far as, in his write-up it says, you were specifically asked by Chief Grafiotis if there were any reports in the police department that the police department was unaware of. The way it's written out on this form was disputed on their one-on-one. They sat down. Lieutenant Klein, to his benefit, sat down with Officer DeFina, and Officer DeFina said, I don't remember that question being asked specifically that way. Can we go to the tape? And if I'm saying this right, Lieutenant Klein? Lieutenant Klein went to go 7 days after the hearing, the commission hearing, went to go listen to the tape to see if in fact it was the way it was written down or if it was some variation thereof. The tape had already been destroyed. That presents a problem. Two people can disagree. I mean, we can sit here and I thought you said something and you thought I said something, and that's why in some circumstances it's a good idea to have tapes. Something as serious as this, when you're attacking someone's credibility and they say, look, go listen to the tape. Officer DeFina had no idea that in 7 days the tape would be destroyed. So as far as credibility goes, and Lieutenant Klein had no idea either. I think there was a genuine attempt to settle this by going to the tape, but that wasn't available. So when I look at a lot of the stuff in this report, it's either benefit of the doubt to Officer DeFina, and also that he disputed some of the issues. It's not. I mean, you've had meetings where people on the police department asked how many incidents that happened at school, and they came out with a number. And then someone did some research and found out the number was different. Now, some people can say, was that a lie? Was it a misunderstanding of the question? I don't know. You know, I'm hearing this being untruthful thrown around an awful lot, all over the place. And I really think that people ought to get the benefit of the doubt, whether it be, and that goes for, you know, I'm sitting here saying that management too. You give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes when they say something and perhaps misunderstand the question, but you have to give that same consideration to the officers who, especially at a public hearing, who are not used to speaking in public or knowing what would be appropriate to say or know what the laws, every law is. They're not lawyers. I mean, you just had a captain tell me that he couldn't tell me if a charge was preferred because it would be against the law. No, it would be against the law to disclose a person's name and age. Not whether that incident took place. That's not against the law.
I guess that would be the same way as saying there were incidents that weren't written down yet, even though they were juveniles.
Say that again?
You said that Officer DeFina didn't say whether there was any reports not made because there was juveniles involved that would be proper.
No, that's not what I said. I said that it was under investigation. And also, depending on what you thought the question was, he thought he answered it appropriately. And that's why they were going back to the tape.
Can I ask Officer DeFina what he thought the question was?
Go ahead.
Found problems in pretty much. Here. Can you hear me? I found problems in pretty much every version of what was said at that police commission meeting.
Well, what did
And
you
it's
say?
not
What was the question?
It's not.
What did you believe the question was, is what I asked. That's all I want to know, is what your version is.
I think it's pretty close to what the commission minute is. Again, I can't remember exactly because there's no tape, but where it says, and Francine put this in there after reviewing the tapes, that's the policy, or that's their normal thing. It says the chief asked, "There any problems in the schools that have been portrayed to them?"
That happened
Now,
what?
portrayed to them. I didn't understand it when he said it. You guys were there. You heard it. When he asked me, my response was, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're saying. Could you please clarify that? I honestly don't know what you just said. And in here it says, he clarified himself, and let's see. He then clarified after a request for clarification on his question. He never clarified anything to me. He never even spoke to me after that. He leaned forward and said, Paul, and Paul stood up, and Paul asked him a completely different question. So that was my point to Lieutenant Klein. None of this happened. That's why it was so important for the tape. And when he gave me the discipline, I said, be careful how you submit this. Be careful how you give me this discipline, because this isn't what I remember it saying. And we should go back to the tape and listen, because if you send this forward, the chief may say, whoa, that's not what it said, and you could find yourself untruthful. But then you see the chief's response saying, I specifically asked Officer DeFina about whether he had submitted reports for all incidents in the schools. He indicated he had done so. That's not even what my response was. And why would I do reports for all incidents in the school? It's only when they rise to the level of the safe school report, which is what my response was at the meeting. If it rises to the level of the safe school report, and the school reports
Well, I guess this one would have rose to that, correct?
the
Would
fight,
this incident have rose to that?
the mutual combat fight,
Yes.
yeah, it rose to
Okay.
the level. That's why I did a report. Nobody told me to do a report. I did it on my own. Even though the lieutenant knew about a fight on Wednesday and never felt like he needed to talk to me as a supervisor, ask where the report is, how busy my week is, what's going on.
So-
Just waits for me to turn it
With that statement, you're saying that you don't do a report on everything that you do as a police officer?
in the school. No,
Not in, for safe school? You're not
I
doing
didn't
a
say safe
report?
school. I didn't say. I said when it rises to the level of safe school.
And we just
report.
said this one rose to that level.
And I submitted a report on the 19th.
report.
I submitted a report. I don't
You
know
asked
what
if it rose to the level of safe report. He responded,
Excuse me.
And-
Public has no comments.
Can I make a comment?
I just want to clarify this because of this, people start talking by each other instead of with each other, and You asked whether it rose the level of safe report. He stated it did. Now, if he was allowed to stay, my point was, as a manager, he should have been allowed to do that on Thursday when it happened. If it wasn't that important on Thursday, why does it become a matter of national crisis on Wednesday? Now, I realize there was a thing done on the website from the child's home. The child was still not in school, and it was done from home. In fact, it's my understanding that 2 detectives went to talk to this individual, and the individual, after being spoken to by 2 detectives, shows up at school with "stop snitching." So, as far as the reporting issue goes, it should have been done on the 11th. And I think in this particular circumstance, people are trying to cover themselves because of the seriousness of the other thing that we talked about. And also, there was an assault. And in this report, it says, a student being physically assaulted in a cell phone incident involving sexually explicit material involving a juvenile is equally important. Well, as a parent, let me tell you, my personal opinion, as a parent, they're not equally important. And as a lawyer and a former police officer, one's a felony and one's a misdemeanor. So they're not equally important. There's been fights in schools, they should be addressed forthwith, but a felony has to be addressed immediately.
Hang on, Liz. Lieutenant Klein,
Yes, sir.
what happened the day of the incident? Did we send him home?
We sent him home because it was the understanding that the incident occurred in Manchester, and Manchester would be handling that, was my understanding. And before he went home, he was instructed clearly to brief the detectives on what he had thus far, as was that explained to him at the school, to instruct them as far as what he had so far. So this excuse of, I ran him, rushed him out the door after choking him out, as he puts it, it didn't occur, okay?
No one said choking them out.
Because the inference was there. I don't appreciate it.
So you're saying you never placed your hands on him?
I may have touched his shoulder, sir, but I was talking to him in a friendly way. I would never approach one of my officers that way. I take offense to it.
And you didn't ask him whether he was on his time or
He was on his time or on the department time, yes.
so you
He
did
was
ask
sitting there
that?
talking about nothing related to the case. He was talking about other things, nothing related to the case.
May I try to clarify a few points?
Okay.
Thanks. I mean, we're here today for a grievance about Officer DeFina's conduct. And it seems like Officer DeFina and the union would like to talk about everybody else and everybody else's responsibilities and everybody else being at fault. And let's just look at what has happened here and what you haven't heard anything that refutes what I'm about to say. Officer DeFina did not report the December 11 incident to Lieutenant Klein on December 11. Nobody said anything different about that. What they like to talk about is what else he was working on, which was meaningful for sure. But he never reported to Lieutenant Klein that there was an assault. That didn't happen. Lieutenant Klein learned about that for the first time on December 17. That is what occurred, and you've not heard anything different from Officer DeFina. You've heard a lot of reasons why he shouldn't talk about things, why he didn't create a report in a certain time frame. The fact is, he didn't have a report to Lieutenant Klein until December 19. Lieutenant Klein didn't even know about this assault until December 17. And frankly, I think that an answer for the commission when this issue did come up would have been to indicate, if he knew an assault existed, to indicate that it was pending. So we come away from this with something absolutely established, that he didn't report to his superior as he was supposed to do. That's the basis of why Lieutenant Klein has asked for this discipline, and this discipline should be upheld. There's been no violation of Article 18. Thank you.
Attorney Cahill, you said that Officer DeFina was not there on Friday the 12th, does that mean that we do not have an SRO in the schools every day? I was always under the impression that
Officer DePina says if he's not working, then there's no SRO assigned to the schools, that's correct.
so there's no coverage.
I'm not saying the town doesn't respond, but there's no SRO.
Okay. Does Officer DeFina have the prerogative, you stated that this was a serious incident, does he have the prerogative to request to come in and write this report on his day off, the 12th, to report this incident? I mean, can he, I would imagine he could ask his supervisors, in view of the seriousness of the incident, that maybe you should have written it up on Friday the 12th.
I understand what you're saying, but why wouldn't you write it up on the 11th instead of sending him home? When it's fresh, you know, if it's, sorry, if it's, and it is important, and I think that's where the rub comes, is the fact that Officer DeFina did think it was important, both things, and I think it bothered him that someone, you know, this isn't a grab at trying to get overtime. That's not the issue here. If someone in management, Lieutenant Klein, the captain, had sent someone else to the school to carry on the investigation so that there wouldn't be overtime, non-issue. But they told him to come back, no overtime available, changed the order from Detective Sergeant Panatti, and sent him home.
And you will, what happened between Friday the 12th and then you said we went all the way to the 16th, Tuesday? There was no school on...
It was...
He didn't work again till Tuesday?
I believe it was an ice storm on that Monday. Saturday, Sunday were days off, and Friday was...
It was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
Oh, that was the ice storm 4-day event.
Okay, so he was off on Monday also?
I worked in this...
Patrol.
I know I've said this a couple times over, but I'll just say it one more time. When we're talking about the issue of Officer DeFina being called away from the school, it's important that you do bear in mind Lieutenant Klein did not know at that time, did not know that there was an assault that had happened. Pure and simple. He didn't know that until the 17th. So I just ask that, I reiterate that, because I just don't want these issues to get confused. Thank you.
I guess I want to go back to the commission meeting. Excuse me. I was there, and I remember a very simple question to you. It wasn't verbally beyond comprehension. It was very simple, as it states in the minutes. Is there anything going on that we don't have reports for? And your answer was no. Do you have a problem with the minutes?
I'm looking at the same minutes. It doesn't say what you just said. It doesn't ask me about reports. At no time did I think that they were
Or
asking me...
activities, incidents? I believe the word was incidents. I'm sorry, I will take report back.
Okay. If the question was asked, okay, is there anything we need to know about? Are there any reports that we need to know about? Is there something right now that you're dealing? Are there reports that you haven't completed yet that you want to talk about in open public? And that would have been different. I would have answered it. But that wasn't what they were talking about.
That probably
Captain-
wasn't satisfied with a yes or no answer.
If they had asked the question. Exactly, but they didn't. Any problems in the schools that had been portrayed to them, that's why I said, I don't understand what you're talking about. Which, I mean, I know Commissioner Gagnon knows that's what I asked, that's what I responded, because I heard after the meeting you were pretty vocal about how pissed you were that how upset you were that I was being elusive with, or evasive with answering the question. That was relayed back to me from the officers. You know? My point was, what are you asking? We've got Captain Cecilia standing up, holding reports from a meeting the month before saying, oh, we have 3 reports. I thought everything that was talking about the reports from, you know, that they had tried to gather from Ms. Solet's article. Not, can you please tell us about what's going on in the school right now? Can you please inform us of all the cases you're working on right now? That isn't what they asked, which is why I said, let's go back to the tape. And there was no commission meeting between the 16th till the 30th. And when I asked on the 23rd, hey, can we get a copy of those tapes? Why would they be erased over? Why would the tapes not be there? There was no event that happened in between to record over. So, I don't know what to tell you. But finding a truthfulness is pretty serious. Something that I feel should have an investigation. This department's no stranger to internal investigations, but in this case they decide, well, there's an allegation of untruthfulness and we're not going to investigate, we're just going to throw it on the back of a write-up for submitting reports. That's what I don't understand.
I guess asking for clarification, you have a lot of issues with that.
A lot of, you know,
This, you know, you said you asked for clarification, I believe you were given it.
Not by the chief. I said, can you please, can you clarify
At
that?
that time, nobody clarified that question.
He said Paul, and Paul stood up and asked exactly what he was talking about before, trying to tell the commission that the reports that were discussed at the last commission meeting were all that the department had. He's holding out 3 reports.
if I may, what would be the reason if he didn't think what he's actually articulating at this point? What would be the motive for not telling you? What's the benefit? There's no benefit whatsoever to him personally to actually, the more reports he writes, the better it looks for him as the SRO. So if he didn't think that he was answering the question with regard to the 3 reports that the captain was, which was probably what the buzz was at the time, that exactly explains why you got the answer you did. And as far as things under investigation, it's highly unusual for police departments to give out information before a report is written and signed off by a supervisor. Very unusual.
It was a yes or no question, not specific.
Sorry. Well, you know, when we go over the tape, then we'll have the discussion. Because, I mean, I can only go by the minutes, and I can only go by my client's recollection, and, you know, we can sit here and agree to disagree, but obviously there appears to be some disagreement with regard to what was asked, and then you're also, I guess, trying to say what was in his mind when he was answering a question, which is an impossibility.
I didn't say that. It's our job to ask these questions. That's the only way we're going to be able to determine what we're going to
But,
do.
you know, but the practical matter is, if a police officer is going to be asked to go to a police commission hearing, then if they misspeak or if they don't understand the question, that they're going to be disciplined for it, then it's just going to be one more instance where you're going to have your lawyer there, and we're going to have our lawyer there, and everybody's going to be, you know, it just doesn't lend itself to the free flow of information. If people can't get up at a police commission hearing and state what they, at least what they think is saying, and if they make a mistake, it doesn't end up going on a disciplinary form. It's not like he said, oh, by the way, commissioners, I worked 8 hours, I'd like a check now, can you send me a check? This is about a report that wasn't filed yet. He states it wasn't filed yet now. He's not hiding anything. It's dated the 19th. I mean, there's no benefit to Officer DeFina to not tell you at the time. He didn't have a fight with the kid.
I need to raise one brief issue that seems to be a theme. It's my understanding that in terms of this audio tape, first of all, a body in New Hampshire doesn't need to audio tape a meeting. There's no requirement that it do so under 91A. And I believe that this has been discussed somewhat in the press a little while back, but that the commission was following its protocol as it had for all its other meetings, based on its understanding of some guidance put out by the local government center. So that there shouldn't be an inference read in here, as I think people are trying to create, that there was anything inappropriate that happened here on account of the tape being taped over. That's the first thing. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, and the union can't get away from it, Officer DeFina did not tell his supervisor, as he was required to do, about this assault. You will see in the materials we've submitted Lieutenant Klein and Sergeant Agrafiotis' best recollection of what was said at that commission meeting. You have your own recollection. Officer DeFina does his. The minutes say something about it. But the fact of the matter is, he was supposed to tell his supervisor about this. Had he done it, we wouldn't be here today. And he hasn't done it. So, thank you.
And only because she reiterated the same thing, looking at the entry form, it says 12/11/2008 at 1600 hours. That's when he was told to leave. It's pretty hard to get into a dialogue with a supervisor who's telling you there's no overtime and would you please, move along. I know that in the same circumstance in a paramilitary setting, if a supervisor tells me that I'm done, I'm done.
I'm sorry, this has gone on for a long time. What we have here apparently is that Lieutenant Klein cannot rely on the fact that he will be told pertinent information about an assault, but rather he's supposed to perhaps have a laundry list of questions he needs to ask at the end of every shift to make sure that he gets whatever information happened on that shift. That's not realistic. That's not the way the reporting system is supposed to go. Officer DeFina didn't report it, and now he wants to make a lot of excuses as to why he didn't. But the fact is, he didn't report this incident. It's significant. He should have done it, and that's the basis for this discipline.
I'm sorry. He did report it. It's reported 19th, and the complaint states that it was 8 days late. No, it's not that it wasn't reported. There is a police report. There's a date where he's talked to the principals and got a written statement from them, which was on the Wednesday. I believe it was the following Wednesday, and it was reported. But he did not come in on his days off and report it.
All right, each get one more turn, that's it.
Klein know about this on the 11th. He didn't do it. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Gale, it's your turn. Last one, is it one?
You sure?
Yes.
Again, Officer DeFina used his cell phone, tried to get in touch with Lieutenant Klein, and I believe it was Captain Cecilio, but I'm not positive, but they were in oral boards. Everything got compressed at the end of the day. He made his best attempts. I mean, if you're not that interested in the felony, I don't know what the brouhaha is over the misdemeanor, which was reported. It wasn't reported after he was told to go home. He didn't sit there and type and say, Lieutenant, I'll be right with you. I'm going to finish this report. But he did follow up. He did get the safe school report. He did file a report after his 4 days off.
I tell you, it was a lot easier when the nuns used to take you out back and beat you with the ruler, and they didn't know the cops never came. Henry, it's your turn.
On tab 3, Attorney Gale, maybe Mr. Noonan wants to answer this.
Tab 3?
Tab 4, page 3.
Is that the...
It's the Teamsters Union grievance report. And I'm sure it's appropriate because it probably would have been submitted, but is it normal for the same person to sign both as shop steward and member? I noticed Jason signed both places. So he's signing as what, the assistant shop steward? Is that his title?
If the steward isn't available, he can sign for himself.
As the assistant steward? Is that his title?
As whatever.
Okay, so a member can sign both places?
Okay. All right. Move on to grievance report 0805. I'm sorry. 901. Still got the wrong page. Who would like to start with this one?
I'll grab that one. This arose out of two separate suspensions that are in your packet. I have them in my hand, so I apologize. But there was they're in your packet, aren't they? Yes. The special order where he's placed on suspension for the days of January 8th and January 9th. He will turn in his badge, identification, firearm during this period of suspension. So he does that, and then a subsequent 5-day, which starts on the 12th through the 16th for 40 hours. And it states that he should turn in his badge, gun during this period of suspension, which means that he won't act as a police officer in the town of Hooksett during the pendency of his suspension. The grievance arises out of the fact that during the weekend, he wasn't suspended, and he would be entitled to act as a police officer in the town of Hooksett, whether it be driving through or an overtime shift if it was made available. And in fact, there were 2 overtime shifts that were posted for the weekend. Now, if the town wants to suspend someone for 15 days and give the period of time, then I guess they can do that. But they specifically state the dates of suspension on the special orders. And if we're going to just look within the 4 corners of the suspension, then there is no reason that on the 10th and 11th, he shouldn't have been allowed to work or be called in and be subjected to a callback per order of the chief, or take an overtime shift and work in his function as a police officer. Now, the department does some after the fact writing of why this wouldn't be a grievance. And on page 9,
Where is the information in there, or is it not in here? Yeah.
I mean, that's 3, page 3.
Page 3.
That would be
Okay.
the special orders look like this, and they have the actual dates on them, and they're referred to. They're also referred to in the memo on page 9 from Lieutenant Klein to Chief Grafiotis, and it's dated January 22nd, which is obviously well past the date that he could have worked and support his family and also provide a police function for the town of Hooksett. And it says, given the performance of this officer on 2 previous overtime assignments, I would not have approved or recommended him being approved to work either shift on the 10th or 11th. And when I see things like that, I have to ask the police commission, because, I mean, you are the body in charge of the police department. Do you have quotas with regard to the number of tickets, arrests for a person on patrol? Okay. You said no. I think you might have noticed the last hearing, that even though he's on suspension without pay, when he sees some of the students, he reaches out for them, and he seems, delighted to see them. They seem delighted to see him. And when he's on patrol, if he sees students around, he does stop and talk. And he also does, he did respond to the radio. There's no reports of him not answering his radio. There's no reports of an accident going, no services being delivered because he was out of service doing something he shouldn't be doing. So I really find this memo rather pretextual in the fact that it's kind of done just for the sake of the grievance after the fact. The bottom line is you're taking a suspension that he was given, and then you're adding backdoor a 2-day suspension that's not written anywhere, and you're just not allowing him to make a living. But you're not going to suspend him, but you're just not going to let him come back to work. And that's just not appropriate. And I think it's, yeah. So we would ask that there were 2 shifts on that weekend that were open, and I think he's entitled to the compensation because people were forced to work.
Can I ask a question? That's my question, Mr. Gale. Could you point to something in the contract that I can get my arms around here that would require the chief to call back Officer DeFina as opposed to somebody else?
There's nothing in the contract that says that he has to call Officer DeFina, but there's nothing in the contract that allows him to suspend someone without cause.
No, but I mean, a grievance has to be related to the contract. It's about the interpretation of the contract somehow. What I'm struggling with is to try and figure out where in the contract it requires the chief to call back Officer DeFina as opposed to some other officer.
He could have done that, but without continuing the suspension. The grievance is the fact that he continued the suspension over the weekend.
But what I'm asking, okay, let me go at it another way. I think we'll agree there's nothing in the contract that would require. Is there some policy you can point to or past practice at the Hooksett Police Department that would somehow indicate that Officer DeFina should have been in that weekend as opposed to officer somebody else?
I think you're missing the point of the grievance. The grievance is that it was an unjust discipline without just cause. You took away a person's livelihood or ability to make. He might not have gotten called, but he might have gotten called. But you took away his ability to perform the function of a police officer in Hooksett, which is called a suspension. There's a process to suspend someone. We're here now talking about those things.
But you're not suggesting that because Officer X is not called in for a weekend that somehow he's suspended?
No, that's when his suspension was over on Friday, they would not give back his police equipment.
When was his next schedule?
Monday.
That was his schedule.
No, that was
Suspension. So the next suspension was Monday. Maybe I jumped on what you were going to ask. So, I mean, again, to make a contract work, why not just suspend them for the 12th, the 8th and 9th, and then suspend them on the 15th through the 20th and say, we'll see you on the 20th, even though there's a bunch of days in between there, we're not going to give you back your police equipment. You're not going to be a police officer. We're not suspending you. We don't have to call you in. It's just, I think it's inappropriate.
What's the relief you're requesting?
The overtime shifts that were filled by force.
You want to pay for the weekend?
Was it 4 hours?
Well, there were 2.
4 hours.
There's 2 8-hour shifts.
Call-in's 4 hours.
One person requested to do 4 hours, so it would have been 8 or 12 hours.
12 hours.
Not afforded the opportunity.
Okay. I understand. Thank you.
Hold on a minute.
Yes, just make sure I'm clear.
You asking permission?
He was suspended for January 8th and 9th. And then he was going to be suspended from January 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th.
Correct.
I thought you said before that it was the 15th and 20th. And then he was asking to work for the 10th and the 11th. But you kept alluding to that was discipline, the 10th and the 11th, because
Let's put it this way. I believe, let's say you're a CPA, and I take your license to be a CPA for a month. And then I say, next month on the 1st, you can do your duties with regard to CPA, but I take away your office. So it's great being a CPA, but you can't make any money if you can't go into your office. So basically, it's a suspension. It's taking away your ability to do a job. And discipline comes under the contract, under 18, has to be just cause. If they wanted to suspend him for the weekend, then they should have suspended him for the weekend.
Well, I guess they suspended him for his time that he was on the schedule. If you take a week off, it's 5 days, not 7, correct, that you get paid for?
Well, police departments generally are not working on the same schedule as everybody else.
I understand that, but they still have a schedule that goes however long. That, I believe, is what he was suspended for, was the time he was on the books to work, not including his time off. That's how you come up with the number of days.
I agree.
Missing something?
Yeah, he wasn't suspended for the weekend, therefore he should have been allowed to be available. You can disagree with me, that's
No,
fine.
I guess I'm
but-
just trying to understand it. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with you at this point. I'm trying to understand this.
The suspensions that I've ever seen in my career, both as a union official and a lawyer, are usually 20-day suspensions, 5-day suspensions, at the end of which they give a period of dates. It's not the union's job to tell management how to write their suspension memos. If they wanted him not to be a police officer on the weekend, then it should have read that you are suspended until the last date of this series. Come and pick up your police gear at that time. And then that would give the grievant an opportunity to go before a third party and say, is this just or unjust? But now, because there's nothing in writing, it's just that it was done, you're kind of taking away the ability to really get your teeth into it and grieve it under the contract, even though it was an action.
at the inception of this meeting, I said there was a lot of material given to us, and I thought I read in here someplace that weekend duty, you bid it, or it was a bid, and then it was like awarded to whoever wanted to work that weekend. Did I misread that someplace? I can't find it now.
No, the management gets to determine who will work the overtime shifts available on a weekend.
But you volunteer for it?
They determine who will do that work. They have a system where they do look into who would be willing to do it, but it's ultimately their decision as to who can work that shift or not. It's a management right prerogative. If I could, I don't know if this is a good time for me to...
Well, he wasn't scheduled to work.
Correct. A lot has been said here already, but what I think we keep hearing a theme about is a theme of entitlement. That an entitlement for something that Officer Defina and any officer in the police department is not entitled to, and that is work on a weekend. There's been a lot of talk about the scheduling of the suspensions. If you're suspended from work, it assumes that you would have been at work but for the suspension. Officer DeFinas, we've heard a lot of, is a school resource officer. He is not scheduled as such to work the weekend. And as a matter of fact, Officer DeFina, just like everybody else, if they ask to work a weekend for overtime, asking isn't getting. That holds true for everybody. So the police department does have some discretion about who they're going to assign to overtime work. It's up to them to determine who to do it, who should do that function. So the fact that he asked for it, he's not entitled to it. Some other officer asked for it. That other officer wouldn't be entitled to it. There's no entitlement here that is being taken away from him. And as a matter of fact, the weekend before, Officer Davina did have a chance to work 2 overtime shifts. And the performance level wasn't to management's satisfaction. There were some concerns that he wasn't producing a lot during those 2 overtime shifts. But the point of fact is, take away all that. The fact is he had a chance to work overtime the weekend previously. Management is within its discretion, Lieutenant Klein is, Captain Cecilio is, to determine who will work the overtime shifts on a weekend. And he'd had that chance to do it just the weekend before. So certainly they're within their rights to assign Officer DeFina or any other officer to a weekend shift. And that's what happened here. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense when somebody is serving 2 suspensions to put them ahead in line and have them work an overtime shift simply because they ask you to do so. And as a matter of fact, that determination is made every weekend as to which officer will work, and just because an officer requests it doesn't mean that they're going to get it. So there's not been any discipline here, and as you've already heard the union talk about, there is nothing in the contract that says Officer DeFina is entitled to work this weekend shift. So we ask that you deny the grievance. Thanks.
On page 9, it alludes to the B shift on the 3rd and 4th of January. What is the B shift? What time is that? What time is the B shift?
I think Lieutenant Klein can answer that best.
Day shift. 0800 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon.
What time in the morning?
8 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon.
Okay. And up on the 3rd paragraph, it says that they were forced on the 10th or 11th. What does forced mean? It says it's speaking. Officer Warhol, Lombardo, and Jerry Knight notifying them that they were forced on the 10th and 11th, first half of the days.
It means that they were, as I understand it, and I'm subject to being corrected, that they were ordered to work those shifts as opposed to volunteering.
Okay. Is it possible, and I guess I'll have to ask the chief this, that maybe there wasn't much activity on January 3rd and 4th because all the bad guys were resting up for New Year's Eve? I don't know. Okay.
If I may, again, you asked a good question, and you brought out the point that I was trying to make, that people were forced to work when there were other officers that were willing to work, which means that other officers that were forced couldn't do whatever they might have planned to do with their family. As far as activity, without having one person's activity record here without the other people for the last 2 weekends with it is really not all that demonstrative of anything. Because I don't know if it was a slow, cold January day in New Hampshire, which would shock me, but I live in a town the same size as yours, 13,000 people, and there are some weekends where it's hopping, and there are some weekends where it looks like everybody went to Cape Cod. So.
On page 10, if I understand this patrol division schedule, the people that we're talking about that were forced, if I'm reading this right, it says does that mean they only work, it says till noon, they were forced to work half-days? So we had 4 people involved for an 8-hour shift.
Lieutenant Klein can answer that, but I believe that is,
No, what you had was you had 2 officers on midnights, forced over for the first 4 hours, and then the other 2 officers from evenings volunteered to come in at half shift. So they took the 4 hours, each of them. That would be Officer Sirik and Officer Durkins. They took the shift on their own volition, they weren't forced. The other folks, which would be Officer Warhol and Officer Lombardo that are cited in the memorandum, those are the only 2 officers forced, and that's for a 4-hour block.
That just clarified the question I was going to ask.
That's it? All right, I'm asking for a 5-minute non-meeting with attorney. We call for a 5-minute recess. All right.
Hey, you want a tripod for that thing? I'll bring one next time. I got one on it.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Okay, discussion on grievance 0804.
I'd like to speak on 804. I don't think at this time it's a practical matter to attempt to change the verbiage of that collective bargaining agreement. And seeing as we're coming up in negotiations this summer, that can all be discussed for the contract that will commence July 1st of 2010.
Marianne, any comments? I agree. So, can I make a motion?
Second.
Or no?
No. I make a motion that grievance report number 805 be denied.
105.
Pardon?
0804.
0804. I'm sorry.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Grievance, 0805. Marianne,
Yes.
anything to say?
Again, I think I see this as a contract issue. Time to take that up is at renewal time.
All right.
Um,
So,
This is somewhat of a convoluted grievance, and he said, they said, I think Officer Defina had some legitimate questions, so I would, my personal opinion, we should go to 1 day for a disciplinary suspension.
I agree. I find the first memo a little sarcastic, and I find some of the second letter a little on the offside, but I do agree there's some legitimate questions that were asked and needed defining. I also go with the recommendation for 1 day only, so that would give a day back. Looking for a second on that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, grievance 0806. Am I correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chairman, I feel like this is quite a lengthy grievance, and I feel that we need more time, or at least I need more time to digest this, and I would like to request we reconvene tomorrow evening.
That's fair. I agree with that one.
I agree.
Not to be talked about outside of this agenda, but for personal reading and gathering your questions. Understood?
I make a motion, we reconvene tomorrow evening at 5:30 here at Town Hall to air grievance report number 806.
Well, just for, before you do that, you can make that motion in a minute. What's the feelings on grievance 0901? That's the one about the callback.
We might need any more time.
Good with that one? Okay.
No, I have I'd like to discuss this.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay, okay. I feel Attorney Cahill admitted to the fact there's nothing in a collective bargaining agreement that says that Officer Defina had to be given those 2 days, so I think he should not be compensated for any lost wages and benefits.
No,
Questions?
I agree.
I understand what you were saying about how it was worded, but I guess coming from the outside, which all of us do, not being part of a paramilitary organization, I took it that if I'm suspended for 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is, the weekend that I'm not on at work is part of that. That's my opinion, but I also agree that it should stand as is. I will make that motion that it stands the way it is.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, the motion has been made to come back tomorrow night for grievance 0806. I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Call for adjournment, 7:15.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
I know that, but I thought I would give you a courtesy.
Do you know what time the talent show is tomorrow?
I thought it was 6:30.
Let me ask Jess.
Being productive and putting Robert's back. So we just, our biorhythms are so many violations here.
Here's the 50 reports that don't exist. I don't know.
It's only 3, not just big reports. Good.
No problem.
The video link, awesome.
Yeah,
It was awesome.
Thanks.
It's such a new thing. I really hope we can taste it. This is what
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm not allowed public input. I'm talking to you. I am not allowed public I want to he stated it in public. Was that not? Excuse me, was that not a religious hate statement? I am fully offended by your comment about the nuns getting students from the back. After a long conversation we had about students, you need to apologize to them. That's all you need to say. Thank you very much. That's all I need. How many years did you spend in California? 9. And therefore what? And therefore, as the chairman of this lecture, after a long discussion like student assault, and misdemeanor, you conclude this discussion by saying that we need to have a non-demon.
No, I said, no, that's not what I said. I said it used to be easy when you're on back on.
Hold the tape. He's got the video right there. You need to apologize for that tomorrow in front of everybody. I have nothing to apologize for. I couldn't state it at public input, but I'm asking you right now. I went through your lawyer first and then to you. I am fully offended by this.
Yeah. It'll be on the internet tomorrow. You can look at it. Well, if you want to access the tape, you can.
Why don't you go to
It's like packing.
God bless her. She's got a motherland. Well, I've eaten one time.
I went to his lawyer first.
We're going to the lake tomorrow, and I have a bunch of stuff
It's a public place. It's like the street.
The lake isn't going away with the flowers. No, you don't get on it. We got the phone. Oh. We can't leave the postpone. That's some kind of suggestion, and I'm like, we're not doing it. So it's not today. Oh, no, he didn't prep it. Because I read the prep, and basically said it's going to take. Yeah, so, well, they say it's a lot of water. So anyway, we pulled the plug. I need to go up into a serious 2 days worth of work. Got the front done. Whenever we went, I don't know. No, we went this week. Like maybe Monday. Maybe Monday. It was Monday. And then we'll up again for 2 more days. If I had waited until Friday to do the front, I would not have It's colder on the inside, so I've got a few more days. But we need to get maybe everything's up. The front is the worst. It's like I want to drive home.
Sorry, I gotta go.
So I need to get
You just praise the perennial. And it doesn't kill us. You're right. I think we have three. What is it?